It's been said that if you want to make a small fortune in America, start with $1 billion. But what about $378 million? How does one go about making that much money? What helps to have insider information, which is precisely what happened to those who attended a secret meeting in the state of Georgia back in 1910. But before we continue, remember to give this video a thumbs up and support us. Thanks. Georgia is a beautiful southern state that has its fair share of secrets. Atlanta is considered the unofficial capital of the South, and the city of Savannah was actually the original capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. But neither of these cities were where our story takes place. Instead, we travel to the small island community of Jekyll Island located off the coast of Georgia. During the early 20th century, Jekyll Island was a private playground for the richest people in America. It had its own rail line, luxurious hotels, and even its own private police force. And it was here on Jekyll Island that a secret meeting took place. The date was November 14th, 1910. The participants were some of the most powerful bankers and businessmen of the time, and the subject was how to best serve the interests of their class. But before we can talk about the meeting itself, we first have to talk about the main instigator behind it all, Senator Nelson Aldrich. He was born into wealth in Rhode Island, and went on to become a major player in Republican politics. In fact, he was so influential that he earned the nickname the Senate's Stoic Republican Leader. Although there was nothing stoic about his personality, he was actually known for being quite boisterous and loved smoking cigars while driving his horse. But his real passion was the establishment of an organization dedicated to furthering the interests of the upper class. Initially, he tried to keep it a secret from his fellow senators. But eventually they got wind of it, and it became common knowledge that he was trying to build an elitist cabal of rich people. The senators didn't like this idea at all and openly criticized him for it. This put Aldrich in a bit of a bind, because he couldn't just come out and say that he was forming an organization of plutocrats. His fellow senators would have laughed in his face. So instead, he concocted a more palatable cover story. He claimed that he was merely planning a weekend retreat for some friends on Jekyll Island. Now, technically, this wasn't a lie since he did plan on having friends over. But it was still a ruse since he also planned to use the weekend to further his nefarious goals. And so the invitations went out, and soon enough, the island was swarming with wealthy elite. There were 6 in total, and each one of them was chosen very carefully by Aldrich. The first was Henry Davison of Goldman Sachs. He was a broker who helped fund the Russo-Japanese War and knew the ins and outs of Wall Street like the back of his hand. Then there was Benjamin Strong, the president of the Bankers Trust Company. He was a man who understood the importance of international banking and had worked closely with European banks to facilitate loans. Then came Thomas W. Lamont, who was a senior partner at the investment bank Lazard Frères. He was known for being a bit of a wild card, but was still considered a trustworthy banker. The fourth attendee was Charles D. Norton, who was the president of the First National Bank of New York. He was a cautious man who preferred to play it safe, but was still very much in favor of big business. The fifth member was Ahmed Z. Schiffman, who was a member of Kuhn, Loeb, and Company. He was considered the most controversial of the group due to his aggressive business tactics, but was still very much a loyal member of the cabal. Finally, there was Paul Vorburg, who was a partner at the banking firm of Wertheim and Company, was a proponent of central banking, and was instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve System. So with the attendees chosen, the meeting commenced in the private dining room of the Jekyll Island Club. As the men sat down to dinner, they knew that they were about to take part in something historic. They were going to lay the groundwork for a new world order, a world order that the interests of the few would dominate. They discussed a variety of topics related to the economy and finance, but the main subject was how to prevent future panics like the one that had occurred in 1907. Back then, the run on the banks had almost brought the entire U.S. economy crashing down, and they all agreed that such an event could not happen again. At first, they considered simply strengthening the regulations on banks to ensure that they had enough gold to cover their liabilities. But this idea was quickly discarded as it would infringe on the freedom of enterprise. In their eyes, any restrictions on banks would be tantamount to communism. Instead, they decided that the solution lay in creating a central bank, one that would be run by the government but backed by the full faith of the Treasury. It would be this institution's job to step in during times of crisis and restore order to the markets. The details were hashed out over several days of intense debate, and by the time they were done, they had created a plan for a central bank that was both comprehensive and detailed. The concept was revolutionary, and it would go on to become the foundation of the Federal Reserve System. Once the meeting was over, the men returned home and tried to downplay the significance of what had happened. They didn't want anyone to know that they had been plotting in secret to create a central bank. However, the cat was already out of the bag, and soon enough, the newspapers were filled with stories of the secret cabal of bankers who had met on Jekyll Island. The public was outraged, and many demanded that the government investigate the group. However, nothing came of it, and the bankers were able to get away with what they had done. In fact, they went on to successfully implement their plan and create the Federal Reserve System. It went through several revisions before it was finally established in 1913, and it's been around ever since. Now, whether or not the Fed is a good thing depends on who you ask. Some people believe that it's absolutely necessary in order to keep the economy stable. Others think that it's a tyrannical institution that needs to be abolished. But there's no denying that it's had a profound impact on the world. In fact, some people believe that the Fed is nothing more than a tool of the elite, a way for them to control the money supply and manipulate the markets to their advantage. Considering that the Fed was created by a secret cabal of bankers, it's not hard to see where these conspiracy theories come from. But regardless of what you think about the Fed, there's no denying that the meeting on Jekyll Island was a watershed moment in history. It marked the beginning of a new era of finance, and it set the stage for the world we live in today. These days, it's easier than ever to become a millionaire. Just ask Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or Richard Branson. All three of them are worth billions of dollars, and they've managed to make a fortune doing things that most people would never dream of. But what if you're not content with just being a millionaire? What if you want to be a billionaire? Well, it's not easy, but it can be done. Just ask anyone from the Middle East, Russia, or China. All of these countries have billionaires. They've managed to make a fortune doing business in some of the most cutthroat environments in the world. But what if you don't want to do business in a developing country? What if you want to make your billions here in the good old capitalist paradise of America? Well, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. You need to find an industry that's ripe for disruption, and then you need to have the guts to take on the establishment. And let's not forget about the importance of being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes luck is all you need, but even luck doesn't matter if you're not prepared for it. So always be ready to seize the moment. And most importantly, never give up. If you really want to be a billionaire, then don't let anything stand in your way. No matter how difficult it seems, it's not impossible. And if you work hard enough, you might just find yourself sitting on top of $1 billion fortune before you know it.